Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this Morris C8 quad. I guess the first thing to say is that the picture on the box isn't quite the vehicle that this kit builds. I noticed this myself shortly after building it, which might shock some of you, and I also saw at least one person on the internet being a very angry boy about this. I believe what's shown here is the Canadian military pattern one, and not the Morris version that the kit represents. In fairness, it does look close, and it does also say that contents may vary from those shown. It is certainly something to be aware of, but not really something to get angry about. Anyway, this is a 28mm scale plastic wargaming kit which can build either a Mark II or a Mark III Morris quad. The back of the box is pretty much what you would expect from a Rubicon kit. There's a few paragraphs of information about the vehicle, a basic painting guide, and a picture of the included decal sheet. Inside the box, sprues. Oh, what a nice change! There are two sprues which are very neatly moulded in a grey colour. At this point I've built quite a few Rubicon kits, and I've come to expect high quality from their sprues. These certainly don't disappoint in that regard, or any regard really. They are neat and well moulded, and while there are mould lines, because there are always mould lines, they are pretty minor and won't take a lot of cleanup. Like a lot of Rubicon kits, it seems like this one has been designed so the mould lines will have a minimal impact on the detail of the parts, which I think is good. Who doesn't like thoughtful engineering like that? If I had any real criticism, it would be that the detailing on the figures' faces is a little bit soft, but they are intended for use inside of a vehicle, so I don't think it's all that bad. And it's certainly not the reason I probably won't use them. I just don't like humans. This is a relatively simple kit, and there isn't a particularly high number of parts. It's not as simple as, say, a Flames of War vehicle, but it's not as complicated as some display models can be. That's not a bad thing, of course, and I feel like it's a good level of complexity to have an enjoyable evening gluing bits of plastic together. One thing I noticed that I think looks really good is the gauges and such moulded into the dashboard. It looks great and is significantly more detailed than you'd really expect to see on a kit like this. Something else I really like is that we get two almost complete bodies to represent the different versions of the Morris quad. I'm sure those who are into building really complex kits would prefer to glue all of the different details together rather than use a relatively complete part, and I do understand, because gluing bits together is fun, but this seems to be an area where they've mostly considered gamers and people who just want the kit built. This makes the kit quicker to build, makes it less likely that you'll mix the Mark II and III parts up, and in the end it'll be a lot more sturdy than multiple parts would be, which is ideal for a model that's going to see a lot of handling. The bonus is that we get an extra, almost complete vehicle that you could turn into a wreckage or something. Here's the decals. There's quite a few markings here. This set is not specific to this exact vehicle, and I'm sure I've seen it before, but it's good, and there's a good chance you'll find other uses for the markings you don't use on this kit. These sheets are really handy to keep around. Instructions. These are also pretty much exactly what I would expect from Rubicon, which of course is a good thing. They are well laid out and easy to understand and follow. There are helpful labels to tell you which parts to put on first and last, and there's a little bit of colour to show you where the parts should contact each other. Let's now use those instructions to aid us in the gluing together of some bits of plastic. We start with the front axle assembly, which is nice and simple. You just have to glue the bottom half onto it. The leaf springs and steering bar thing are all moulded into the two parts, which makes things very simple while still looking quite good and well detailed. That assembly then goes onto the frame like so. The leaf springs might be a little bit fiddly to get into place, but there are guides for them, so it's not too bad. I follow that with the rear axle and suspension. Well, half of it. Positioning this is very easy too. I then glue the lower half on. You could glue these two parts together before installing them onto the frame, and I can't remember why I did it this way, but I don't think it would make much of a difference either way. Once it's together, I added extra glue to all the contact points I could find, just to give it a bit more strength. The drive shaft can then be placed between the two differential boxes. This is probably the easiest drive shaft I've ever installed. If you've got the frame upside down, it'll just sit in place. Then, assuming you are using an extra thin glue, you can just put it on and let it seep in between the parts. Easy. This little whatever it is goes on next. As with the rest of the parts, this is nice and easy to place. It'll pretty much just sit in the right spot, and then you can add glue to it. I think the frame looks quite well detailed, especially considering how few parts it's actually made up of. This is a wheeled vehicle, so it would make some sense that wheels are involved. These parts are all labelled differently, and are intended to go into particular places on the vehicle. Each wheel comes as 2 parts, and has guide pins, so they easily go together in a specific way. Then, I stick them on. There isn't really any keying for the front wheels, and I'm sure it wouldn't hurt anything if you were to swap them around. The rear wheels do, however, have a sort of shape on them. I don't think it's actually intended as keying, but there does seem to be a way they should sit. It's really not all that difficult. The only thing I think is really lacking here is a slightly flattened bit on the bottom of the tyre to suggest the model has some weight to it. It's not really a big problem though, it still looks good. Now that the frame is done, it's time to start working on the body. I glue on this large floor part, I guess you might call it. This pretty much drops right into place. It does look, at least to my eyes, like it's sitting a bit high, but that's just the way the vehicle is. The rear wall of the passenger compartment goes on next. This has an odd round thing at the bottom, and is pretty simple to install, though there is a little bit of play to it, so make sure it's nice and vertical. The rear seats come next, and these are even easier to put in. I follow this with the dashboard and the center console. That's not what that is it? Maybe it's just the space where the engine protrudes into the cab a bit. Not important. As I mentioned before, I really like the level of detail they put into the dashboard here, and I think this is a much better option than just including decals for the gauges. It may be a bit more fiddly to paint, but it's 3-dimensional, which is cool. The steering wheel goes in next, and it's got a really obvious mount, so it's easy to get this into place. A steering wheel is all well and good, but the driver is going to have some difficulty if he has to stand to drive, so I give him a seat. These get pressed down onto the little raised rectangular bits here. The passenger, or co-driver, or machine gun firer, that person's seat goes on in the same way. The front bumper goes on next, and this was actually a little bit fiddly. There isn't much to guide it, or even hold it in place, but I got it into what looks to be the right place in the end. Then, this rear bit. I found it slightly confusing to figure out exactly where this part should sit, but I think I got it right in the end. The lower part of the vehicle is now complete, so it's time to work on the upper part. I start by gluing the rear into place. I've chosen to build the Mark III, so obviously I'm using the Mark III parts. I didn't show it here, but I did test fit to make sure that I could put the body onto the frame and then remove it, and you can do that. So I continue adding details. One of the reasons I chose to build the Mark III was that I liked the tarp that goes on the roof here. If you want, you can model it open without the canvas in place, and in that case, there's a frame part that you would put here instead. I've obviously used the canvas. The recessed fuel insertion holes go into the sides of the body like so, and there's one of these for either side. The Mark II version of these is a bit smaller, so do be sure to use the correct parts. On top of the rear, I add this rack. I'm not entirely sure what this is for, but it goes on nice and easily, and like many of the other parts, I've added extra glue for more strength. It's a really good idea to carry a spare wheel, so I glue that into place in the middle of that rack thing. Doors go on next, and right into the door holes they go. You could, if you wanted, model them open, and that would be a nice way to let you see the seats and possibly the dashboard. There wouldn't be a whole lot holding them on in the open position though. As you can probably tell, I've modelled mine closed. A hatch for the machine gunner to pop out of and start blasting is a fine addition, and you could model this open too, but I think it looks a bit better closed. On the front there's a couple of placard holders, and there are some convenient guide pins and corresponding holes to help you place these. The square one goes on the left, and the round one for the bridging weight goes on the right. And that's the upper body done. Attaching it to the lower half of the vehicle is pretty simple, though you do have to press down on it a bit, and it did need a little bit more pressure than I felt comfortable with. But the plastic is pretty strong, so it's not too bad. It goes together nicely, but without glue it will easily come apart. That's good because it means I can show it all together now, and take it apart later to paint the interior. How convenient. And that's it. The 28mm scale plastic Morris C8 quad, modelled as a Mark III version, is now completed, and I think it's turned out really well. It's not what I would consider a particularly attractive vehicle, but it is interesting looking, and I'm sure it has some use on the gaming table. The instructions say that it can be used to tow the 17-pounder and limber, which is also available from Rubicon, and I will almost certainly build one of that myself. I'm sure it could also be used to tow other things as well. You could probably even use it to do sick jumps, which is an important part of any war game. I think this is a cool little model. It's quick, easy and fun to put together, and the detail is very nice. I'm obviously no Morris quad surgeon, so I'm not going to try and point out any historical inaccuracies or accuracies either. You'll have to find somebody else for that. But it does look very good. It looks pretty much like what it's meant to look like, which is always a good thing. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments section below. If you want to watch me build kits like this one live, head on over to my Twitch channel, which is where I build kits like this live. The link is in the description below. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell here on YouTube for more of this modelling malarkey, and if you'd like to see my videos a bit early before there's any ads, consider becoming a patron. You can find links to Patreon and all of my other things like Discord and social media in the description below. Take care of yourselves, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.